Hey guys, I'm Tierce Green. I'm on the teaching team of 33 The Series for Authentic Manhood, and I'm the director of the Authentic Manhood Initiative. I've devoted my full time to coaching men around the world, helping them create and implement an effective disciple-making strategy for men in their church and in their community. Hey, it's a privilege to be a part of this year's Iron Sharpens Iron Ministry Month, and I'm glad you decided to join me for this session. It's called The Seasons of a Man's Life. So let's get started. If you were about to set out on a journey into unknown territory, well, it wouldn't be smart to begin without a map of some kind. It could prove costly, maybe even dangerous. You'd want to know where others failed so you could avoid the same mistakes, and you'd want to know which paths led to success so you could follow in their footsteps. Well, in this session, I'm going to give you a map, one that will help you navigate the different seasons of your life. You see, we need to know what season of life we're in right now, what needs to be prioritized in this season, and what opportunities and threats that season presents. You see, life is so much more than just living from day to day. It's made up of back to back to back seasons of life. So here are 4 key ideas that will help us smoothly transition through all of these seasons. First of all, it's the idea of reverse engineering. Reverse engineering. Now, this term originally became popular through military and commercial espionage. A business or an army, if they wanted to match the innovative features of one of its competitors, what would they do? Well, they acquired, or sometimes they captured, their competitor's product, and they broke it down into its parts to figure out how they could reproduce it themselves. It's basically the concept of beginning with the end in mind. You know, as men, we've got to figure out where we want to go, where we want to end up in life, and then determine the best steps to get there. One thing that can help us along the way is this. We need to examine the lives of godly men who have gone before us. How did they get where they are? You know, it didn't just happen for them one day. We need to apply our own reverse engineering. We examine the product of their lives, we break it down into its parts, and we figure out how we can make some of the same strategic moves that they made. And that leads us to the second key idea. It's the power of mentorship. Each of us needs to have men in our lives who have already experienced the season of life that we're in right now. So let's say you're in your 20s. Well, you would be wise to have a man in his 30s or 40s who can advise you as you develop vocational skills and start a family. If you're in your 40s or 50s, well, you would be wise to have men in their 60s and 70s helping you prepare for the transition into those years. The third key idea is that of transition. We need to anticipate transitions, not just react to them. According to the experts, men will undergo these very predictable transitions between certain stages of life. And in these transitions, men often feel restless. They feel unsettled and insecure. They experience a very real need to reevaluate themselves or sometimes reinvent themselves if they're going to feel a sense of worth in the next season of life. Now, since we know these transition periods are coming, we would be wise to plan for them. We also need to be aware that those around us and our families will also undergo transitions. People in our workplace, and you know, the needs of our spouse and our children will change with each season. And we need to be in tune with those needs. A question, are you still treating your teenage children like little kids? Are you helping your wife prepare for the empty nest years that are ahead? Wise is the man who is aware of the transitions in his family's going through. the man who anticipates them and he plans for them. Now, the final key idea is a principle that comes from the Bible. It's called the laws of the harvest. Take a look at Galatians chapter 6, 7 through 9. It says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. But whoever sows from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time, in due season, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Well, the first law of the harvest is this: we reap what we sow. The second is we reap more than we sow. And the third is we reap in a different season than we sow. Now, it's crucial for us to understand that the decisions we make today will shape our future seasons. What we are sowing today will come back to us. And oftentimes, it will come back in greater measure, good, bad, or sometimes ugly. Now, with these key principles in mind, I want to lay out a map to help us navigate through the seasons of a man's life. Here we go. The first season of a man's life is spring. Now, this is when a man comes to terms with his identity. This is the childhood and adolescence stage. It should end somewhere between the ages of 18 and 22. It's in this season that a boy becomes a man. Well, he becomes a man, at least physically speaking. The key to this stage is transitioning into adulthood well. This is when he begins to make a break with a home he grew up in. He takes a job, or he goes to college, or maybe he joins the military, or he assumes some new responsibility. Whatever he does, it's during this time of transition in his life, and this is critical, he must grow up. This is the season when life finally stares a man in the face, and he can no longer just live under the wing of his mom and his dad. To succeed, he must transition into manhood. The main questions he must begin to answer in this stage of life are things like, who am I? And just as important, who am I not? Accepting how God has made him will help set him up to succeed in the next stage of life. Now, again, think of this season as spring, when all those things are beginning to emerge, and he is identifying who he is and who he is not. The next season of life is summer. This would be a man's 20s and 30s. The first part of summer, the 20s, should be the first adult stage of a man's life. The first part of this summer season is about learning, and with it comes some very real threats or dangers. For a lot of guys in their 20s, there's the danger that they will get lost in an extended period of adolescence and pursue boyish behaviors indefinitely. In effect, to never grow up. Another significant danger for a man during his 20s, and really this applies to every stage for every man, but especially here, it's how he handles his sexual energy. He must decide, is my sexual energy going to dominate me, or am I going to use it in a principled manner? Is passion going to be something I use, or does it use me? Now, sexual intensity is always part of a man's life, whether you're 20 or 80. I think lust is always going to be a factor. But the question is this: is sexual energy going to be our friend or our master? The Apostle Paul makes it pretty clear for us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. He says, "For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God." Now, guys, this is not a disclaimer on sexual energy. It's a disclaimer on sexual immorality. There's a difference. You see, God created sex, and it should be enjoyed, and it should be one of the great blessings of marriage, but it has to be handled in a principled manner. Otherwise, it will become disastrous. It becomes your master, and you become its slave. Now, if that happens, it'll do great harm to a man, and he'll find himself dealing with the damage later. Now, those are two very real dangers that must not be ignored. But this season also brings with it a major opportunity. It's the opportunity to learn. Learn, be a sponge, soak it in. It's the opportunity to take your first professional steps, to try your first job, to make your first professional mistakes and to learn from them. This is a time to take risks and to seize opportunities. You know, some of the key questions for your 20s include, what do I really want out of life? Where will I distinguish myself professionally? How am I different from my parents? What do I really believe? What skills do I still need to develop? And this is important, around what person or conviction will I organize my life? Author Gordon MacDonald says this. He says the mother of all questions for your 20s is this: around what person or conviction will I organize my life? One must identify an organizing principle that will bring the pieces of life into order. MacDonald says that principle is really a person, Jesus Christ, his saving power, his call, and his teachings. The second part of this summer season is in your 30s, and the 30s are about growth. This is the time to perfect your skill set. To start logging hours in your craft, whether it's plumbing or building, investing, consulting, or whatever. It's also typically in his 30s that a man begins a family. And so now the increased responsibilities of a career and a family bring these unique challenges. It's in this stage of life that a man will be tempted to develop some bad habits, and they're hard to break. You see, with the additional demands at work, he can quickly become a workaholic. And with the increased relational demands of a wife and maybe young kids at home, well, he can quickly become disconnected from God and character-shaping relationships with other men. It can feel like a never-ending struggle to just keep his head above water. Hey, a key word to remember during your 30s is this: margin. You see, working hard is a good thing. So is spending time with your family. So is developing your relationship with God, and so is cultivating authentic relationships with other men. Now, can you feel the tension? Man, in the middle of all those good pursuits, you must make it your goal to create margin so you can move gracefully in and out of those important areas. You see, without margin, do you know what's compromised? What's compromised is relationships. Now, you may have a lot of acquaintances, but no soul-level connections. And your family is just getting the leftovers. You see, satisfying authentic relationships require time and vulnerability. And without margin, well, it's just not going to happen. As you navigate through this stage, it's important to remember that it won't last forever. The long nights with babies crying will eventually pass. Toddlers will grow up. Life will become more manageable. And you'll have several decades on the back end of life when the kids are out of the house. There are two key questions for your 30s. How do I prioritize the demands made on my life? And have I allowed enough time for a spiritual life and authentic relationships outside of my family? The next season requires another transition. It occurs between the ages of 40 and 45. This is where a man transitions out of the early adulthood of his 20s and 30s into the fall season of life. And this is the season of influence from the age of 40 to the age of 60. And guys, there can be a great harvest in this season from the seeds a man has sown and cultivated in the spring and summer of his life. You see, during this transition, a man typically evaluates his successes and his failures from the last 20 years. Some of the key questions in this stage are, have I achieved everything I wanted to? Do I have any dreams that still remain unfulfilled? Can my mistakes be redeemed? And are my accomplishments really that fulfilling? If a man doesn't come to terms with all these things, then the great harvest of his influence will suffer. Watch this story about a man who had to come face to face with his mistakes in this season of his life.
In the early years, the spring season of my life, as a child, I was real active in sports, good in school. I made straight A's and had a lot of friends around the neighborhood. I grew up in a home where I was taught if I was responsible and did the right things that my life would be good. And met my first wife in college, and we were married, and I ended up with a really good job, a career in engineering, and pursued that till my early 30s. And I had money, I had a great job, I had a wonderful wife, I even had a daughter, but I knew that I didn't know the truth. And I'd seen a few people that I kind of looked toward and thought they know something that I don't know. As I got into the summer season of my life, I knew there was something wrong. I knew something needed to change. I knew my wife wasn't happy. I didn't know how to be a father, although I was doing great, as most people would think as a father. I knew that I couldn't tell my daughter the truth. I didn't understand life, and I began searching at that time. A lot of issues began to raise up in my life. I went through a divorce, and when I went through my divorce, I received several DWIs and was facing jail time or prison time if I didn't quit drinking. And my career continued to progress. I did outstanding at my job, was promoted several times. And about 2 years after my divorce, I can remember in a bar at 3 in the morning, calling out to God. It was the first night I'd drank in over 2 years. And I said, God, if you're really there, I give you my life. It was about 2 hours later that I ended up driving my car. And it was the first night I said I had drank. I was arrested for my 4th DUI and ended up being sentenced to prison. During that last year waiting to go to prison, I fell into a major drug addiction. During that time, I lost everything that I had. I lost my home, my life savings. Because of the drugs, I was court ordered not to have any contact with my daughter without direct supervision. And then it was at prison where a lot of things began to change for the good. And I was put in a cell with a guy whose nickname in prison was Preacher Man. He began to pray with me. He gave me a Bible and started asking me to read it. And I can remember that he told me that faith comes by hearing the Word of God. And that he told me just read the Bible. Within 2 months, God completely changed my life. He became very real to me. I now knew God deeply. And my relationship began immediately being restored with my daughter, with my family, with my parents. And when I left prison 10 months later, the first thing that I got to do was see my daughter again. But that was kind of the summer and into the fall of my life. I can remember leaving prison and my heart was back at the prison. I knew so many men there needed to hear the message of hope. At the root of it was not knowing God personally, and so many men don't know that message. The one thing I'd like to share with men is no matter what their spring life and summer of their life was like, that the fall and winter toward the end of their life can be magnificent with God. With Him, it's been unbelievable. I've spent 10 to 12 years following Him now, and it's been the best time of my life.
Men who don't transition well into middle adulthood usually fall to a major danger. A midlife crisis. A guy feels restless. Maybe it's because of unfulfilled dreams or regrets that he believes can't be resolved. It typically plays itself out with guys turning to escapes to numb the pain or making futile attempts to relive their youthful years. And they often develop a preoccupation with recreational gadgets, alcohol, gambling, internet pornography, or even an extramarital affair. The great opportunity in this season of life can be summed up in one word: influence. It's in this season that a man can be more powerful and more productive than he has ever been before. David Levinson calls men between the ages of 45 to 60 the dominant generation. He says that guys in this season create and implement the governing ideas in every sector of society, whether it's politics or business, religion, art, or science. Now, if you're in this stage, then you have a certain level of influence. You are positioned to make a bigger impact for God and His kingdom right now more than at any other season of your life so far. You have the incredible opportunity to accept the responsibility of your influence, to be creative, and to use your influence to lead courageously. Now, your 60s and beyond is generally considered to be the winter season of life. Now, this is also known as the sage season. And this is the time when a man should be marked by wisdom, experience, and respect. That's what sage implies. Proverbs 20:29 says this: "The glory of young men is their strength, but the splendor of old men is their gray hair." Well, hopefully there's more to that than just the color or even the presence of a guy's hair. It should be his composure, his maturity, and his insight should distinguish him. It's in this season of life that you're not perceived by younger guys as a competitor as much as you're perceived as a champion who is qualified to coach them toward their successes in life. Many men in this season possess the confidence necessary to share openly with younger men about their failures as well as their successes. I think the greatest danger of this season is for a man to buy the lie that he can no longer contribute. He's got to realize that although he may be retiring from his career, well, he's not being put out to pasture, and that he can make his greatest contributions at this stage of life. This is the ultimate season for creating and cultivating by blessing others. In fact, the major opportunity of this season is to take advantage of your flexibility. This is when a man has more freedom than he's ever had before, and he can possibly direct his creative energy where he pleases. He can pour into younger generations. He can use his wisdom to create and guide projects that can impact a community or make a difference around the world. He has the flexibility to serve and to mentor others, to multiply his influence. Now, guys, as you look at this map, the 4 seasons of life, where are you right now? There are unique dangers and unique opportunities in each season of life. The major point is you should live intentionally, not just wandering through life and reacting to it, but seeing what's ahead so that you can prepare for the bumps and the transitions and not miss the opportunities. Regardless of the season of life you're in, as men, we are all called to create and cultivate, not just for a particular season, but for our entire life. We're called to follow the example of Jesus. As men on a journey towards authentic manhood, we're called to reject passivity, to accept responsibility, to lead courageously, and to invest eternally. When we were creating this session, which by the way is from 33, the series, volume 1, session 6, I just adapted the series for this purpose, for this conference. When we were creating this series, we asked a spoken word artist by the name of Tadashi if he would create a spoken word piece just for this series. And man, he knocked it out of the park. I want you guys to watch. But hey, stay tuned. Right after Tadashi's spoken word piece, I want to give you a special offer for authentic manhood content for 33, the series.
Time out from the game. In other words, stop playing. Because playing around and playing to win's not the same thing. You can keep playing that game, that's until the weather change. Nobody likes to lose, but they live like they're the same. Spinning wheels like treadmills, going nowhere fast. No plan to be a man, just letting the time pass. Passive, taking whatever's handed to you. Like forbidden fruit after God gave commandments to you. They say opposites attract like shorts in the winter. Never satisfied, longing for June and December. The spring comes in and then it leaves just the same. Those I meet in autumn look at the summer with shame. They see the seasons change but never can maintain. Trying to reverse the time instead of adjusting aim. Reverse engineer it. Try to ride before you steer it. And learn to live with the end in mind, like a period. Find someone who's been there, a mentor who's did it. So you can transition well into what he's intended. Next, what we see is the law of the harvest. Reap, sow, and whatever you do now will affect you till you've departed. Now I heard the world's a stage, a beautiful landscape. A stage in stages, and man's race to man's fate is seen in seasons, like sage is. And when I saw this landscape, it looked like leaves falling from trees, until my eyes were opened by him to everything I should see. Step back from day to day to see from year to year. Let far-sighted blurs begin to become clear. That's when I see seasons. Seasons. Don't waste your season. Learn to live with the end in mind. Don't waste your season. Learn to be one who'll find one who'll teach. Don't waste your season. Learn that each one lends itself to the next. Don't waste your season. Learn that each one has growth to reap. Don't waste your seasons. I refuse to let the 60-year-old me look back at the 20-year-old me like, what was he thinking? Where was the plan? And I refuse to let the kid in me look down at that future grown man. Don't waste your seasons. You have a responsibility as a king, lover, warrior, and friend to look at your time on this stage and its stages and be prepared for every one of them. So don't waste your season.
So guys, thanks again for joining me for this session. That's a lot of content compressed into a short amount of time. If you're interested in more about this journey towards authentic manhood, let me tell you about 33. 33 is 6 volumes of content, and each volume contains 6 sessions. Each session is only about 30 minutes. It's a teaching team, myself, John Bryson from Memphis, Brian Carter from Dallas, and plus we pull in a lot of other stories from men around the world and creative pieces like artists like Tadashi. But the content is video driven. There are training guides packed with supplemental content of bibliographies and scriptures, and about over 100 pages of content in each training guide for each volume. Volume 1 is A Man and His Design. Volume 2, A Man and His Story. Volume 3, A Man and His Traps. 4, 5, and 6 are A Man and His Work, A Man and His Marriage, and A Man and His Fatherhood. Now, if you want to order any of this content, please go to authenticmanhoodinitiative.com. And I want to give you a special code to save $5 every time you order, okay? Just simply type in my name, all squeezed together, Tierce Green, and that will save you $5 every time you order. It never expires until I expire. So, hey, let me know if I can help you. You can contact me through authenticmanhoodinitiative.com, and I'd be glad to answer any questions and maybe help coach some guys in your area to reach men in your community.